In the mid-21st century, due to failed economic policies and an aging population, Japan was on the brink of bankruptcy. Such problems continued to pile up, which was when major powers and the United Nations intervened. Under the pretext of economic aid, medical support, or maintaining order, many personnel were sent in, leading to the gradual expansion of foreign powers and eventually resulting in violence. Countries began using special humanoid mobile weapons called AMEM for a conflict later known as the Border War. Unmanned AMEMs equipped with specialized tactical AI became the main weapons that plunged Japan into flames, and then Japan was divided among the major powers. Sheba and his friends found the remains of an AMEM, quickly collecting any usable parts before leaving. While discussing their findings, everyone debated how to use each part of the AMEM, but Sheba remained silent and didn't reveal anything despite having taken the most components. Later, the group dropped Sheba off at his home, just as they heard a fight breaking out between a group of Japanese people and foreign soldiers. Sheba showed little interest and quietly went inside, because in this era, being born Japanese was like being black. They were often despised, and regardless of talent or money, it was difficult to find stable work. Sheba questioned what he was living for, feeling deeply discouraged. He continued going alone to the mountains to search for something. This time he didn't invite the other three to join him because he didn't know their names or addresses. Their relationship was limited to being part of a group of machinery enthusiasts, which was enough for Sheba. He retrieved the AMEM parts he had previously hidden and inspected them, wandering around until evening before returning home. Just then, Sheba heard someone calling for help. Curiosity mixed with fear made him grip his stick tightly as he slowly approached the source of the sound. Behind the dense trees appeared a box making noise. It introduced itself as Guy, an artificial intelligence with its own consciousness and life. Sheba didn't want to get involved in trouble and was about to leave, but Guy had anticipated this reaction. It scolded him and even knew that Sheba had hidden a communication device from the AMEM. Guy desperately begged Sheba to save it as its battery was running low, while warning that someone was approaching. Immediately after, a military vehicle appeared. The soldiers found Sheba and questioned why he was there at that hour. Sheba calmly replied that he was just camping, but they didn't believe him since this was an area where a battle had just occurred and AMEM remains were present. They also mentioned that they had detected someone stealing equipment. The two soldiers demanded to check Sheba's ID. Although he was an orphan living on inheritance and welfare with a completely clean record, he was still forcibly searched. When they found nothing, they finally let him go. When things settled down, Sheba returned and brought Guy to an abandoned workshop he had secretly occupied. Behind a security door was another AMEM. Sheba began charging Guy's battery, and the AI curiously asked if he had assembled this AMEM by himself. Sheba explained that he had previously discovered the workshop that looked like a relic, with tools still intact inside. It took him a long time to open the door to the secret room, and when he did, the AMEM was already there. However, it lacked a central control device, which was why Sheba had been diligently studying it until now. That was also the only joy he could still hold on to in these divided times. Guy expressed respect for Sheba's hobby and suddenly asked what Sheba would do after completing the AMEM. He remained silent without giving an answer. Guy added that if it was just for hobby's sake, that was fine too, because even during the Border War, people paid money for water and popcorn just to watch two robots fight each other. It all stemmed from their interests. Sheba didn't want to hear more, so he cut Guy off, turned on signal jamming, and left, leaving Guy to charge in the workshop. When the door closed, Guy immediately took action, scanning the entire workshop and controlling the machinery to prepare for some plan. 3 days had passed since Sheba left, and continuous rain made him worried that Guy might deplete the power supply in the workshop. The next day, the military caught Sheba's friends as they were trying to modify a vehicle using AMEM parts. The commander considered all three to be terrorists, showing them a photo of Sheba and demanding information if they didn't want to die. Meanwhile, Sheba was at home fixing headphones when Guy caught the signal and urged him to leave immediately because soldiers were about to arrive. As predicted, soldiers stormed the house but didn't find Sheba, so they checked cameras in the area. Sheba ran to the workshop and was amazed to see that Guy had completed the AMEM, but before he could process this, the soldiers had followed him. Through cameras, they recognized two robots from Oceania along with Sheba's 3 captured friends being held hostage. The commander suspected Sheba of being a member of a terrorist organization and refused to listen to explanations that the three were just car modification enthusiasts. He immediately pointed his gun threateningly. Sheba initially intended to comply to protect them, but Guy spoke up, saying he would be imprisoned forever for the rest of his life, or he could fight back and find another way. Guy compared Sheba to a fish, either accept being caged or leap over the dragon gate and transform into a dragon. It advised that if Sheba trusted it, he should pilot the Without hesitation, Sheba decided to pilot it with Guy. When the commander saw no movement, he ordered his men to open fire. Sheba quickly entered the cockpit and inserted Guy like a key. Within seconds, the analysis system completed, and the name Kenbu appeared as the retinal scan began. Sheba could see the entire scene outside. Guy now appeared with a cuter form. After a short time familiarizing himself with the cockpit, Sheba had Kenbu transform into human form. Following Guy's guidance, Kenbu rushed outside to everyone's astonishment. Sheba flew to an enemy and punched it, then grabbed it and threw it into another one. The enemies returned fire fiercely, forcing Sheba to retreat and find cover. Another jumped out from behind, creating a pincer attack. The situation became dangerous. Guy told Sheba to use a finishing move, saying he should shout the skill name to make it cool. With blazing eyes, as the two charged simultaneously, Sheba shouted, "Iron Bombardment." Kenbu used its weapon to pierce one machine, then quickly grabbed the one behind, smashing it into the remaining enemy. For the first time in his life, Sheba felt truly alive. Immediately afterward, a soldier dragged out Sheba's three friends as hostages and ordered him to surrender. Guy promptly spoke up, asserting that it would handle the situation. Its voice changed, becoming cold and sharp, declaring that the three were merely tools Sheba had exploited to collect parts for repairing Kenbu, and now that the machine was complete, they held no more value. Not stopping there, Guy bluntly criticized the commander, claiming he had missed the opportunity to capture real terrorists and instead arrested and punished innocent civilians, which was the true disgrace. After these provocative and challenging words, Sheba and Guy withdrew, beginning a life of hiding under intense pursuit. That night, Sheba stopped to check on Kenbu. When he opened his phone, he saw the wanted notice with terrorism charges attached to his name, but his growling stomach left him little mental capacity to dwell on it. He asked Guy about their next plan and was told they needed to cross the Seto Inland Sea to enter Okayama, which was outside the jurisdiction of the Oceanian military, thus reducing the risk of being monitored. If they were still pursued, their only option would be to live as wanderers. Finding the explanation reasonable, Sheba relaxed and dozed off to gather strength for tomorrow's journey. The next morning, Sheba had to disguise Kenbu, as Guy announced it needed rest after processing an enormous amount of information the previous day. After completing this task, Sheba went out to find food. Having gone more than a day without eating, he approached a garden full of vegetables. The thought crossed his mind that since he was already labeled a criminal, stealing some produce wouldn't make much difference. So he picked a tomato, and just as he was about to bite into it, the garden owner appeared holding a sickle. Sheba panicked and bowed repeatedly in apology. But instead of getting angry, the garden owner said if Sheba helped him, he would be fed. Under the old man's guidance, Sheba helped harvest vegetables and fruits. By noon, he was rewarded with cool tomatoes freshly soaked in the stream. After eating, the old man asked Sheba to sow seeds, and he eagerly worked until evening. Despite being busy all day, he didn't feel tired. Instead, he felt happy experiencing something new that wasn't available in urban life. Witnessing this diligence, the owner decided to invite Sheba home. His wife warmly welcomed them, prepared dinner, and told him to bathe before eating. A sumptuous meal was served, and Sheba couldn't hide his emotion when tasting the first bite. The simple yet authentic flavor made him tear up involuntarily, as it was completely different from the cheap fast food he ate daily. This warm feeling made Sheba feel happy, but the brief joy was interrupted when the wanted news broadcast appeared on TV. In Sheba's confusion, the owner shared that he once had a son who died in the border war. Father and son had promised to go fishing together, but that dream never came true. The fishing boat still remained abandoned, and if Sheba needed it, the owner would lend it to him. He also believed Sheba wasn't a terrorist, because a real criminal wouldn't bow deeply in apology when caught stealing vegetables, nor would they work diligently helping him all day. The old man emphasized that in these turbulent times, people shouldn't lose faith in each other, and he would place that faith in Sheba. These words moved Sheba to tears as he repeatedly expressed his gratitude. To dispel the heavy atmosphere, the wife smiled and said she would check if the laundry was done, and Sheba quickly offered to help. Just then, the doorbell rang. The owner quickly hid Sheba, then went to meet the police chief who had come to check for any hiding terrorists. He firmly stated there was no one there. Although the police chief noticed Sheba's shoes, he temporarily overlooked it due to his trust in the old man's reputation. That night, Guy contacted Sheba again, saying it had heard everything and understood the police chief had intentionally turned a blind eye. But they both realized that if they continued staying there, the elderly couple would be in danger. Therefore, the next morning Sheba left, leaving behind a letter. In it, he expressed his gratitude for their shelter, thanked them for the meal and warm words, and asked permission to borrow the boat. He deliberately made the house messy to make it appear as if he had attacked them, to prevent the couple from being implicated. Sheba connected the boat with Guy, beginning a new journey. Nevertheless, concerns weighed heavily as the charges against him continued to mount. Though most weren't caused by him, Guy reassured him that everything would eventually be cleared up, as long as Sheba continued moving forward. Hearing this, Sheba felt more confident. Guy announced they were approaching the other shore, where the border war had been fought fiercely. Before they could prepare, the Asian army had surrounded them, setting up a formation with at least 12 machines. With no way to retreat, Sheba's only option was to charge straight ahead. Following Guy's instructions, Kenbu made a huge leap, landing on a broken bridge nearby, then rushed forward to take down an amam, using it as a shield and pushing both into the water. The exhilarating feeling spread throughout Sheba's body as he continued to defeat 2 more enemies. The Asian army commander was amazed at Kenbu's agility. Meanwhile, Guy detected 4 machines locking onto them from a distance. Sheba immediately had Kenbu kick away 2 enemies and seize a gun. Although he couldn't use it due to identity verification requirements, he still utilized the gun's handle to smash the enemy's head. When reinforcements arrived to surround them on all 4 sides, Guy quickly spotted a high-capacity battery nearby exploding. It would open an escape route. Taking advantage of the barrage of bullets, Sheba threw the battery in, creating a large explosion, and escaped with Kenbu. However, they were still under fire, with a series of shots hitting Kenbu's leg, causing it to falter. The enemy immediately surrounded them, firing intensely at the cockpit. The commander demanded Sheba be killed. Kenbu withstood the first wave, but the situation remained perilous, and at the most critical moment, a shot rang out from afar, taking down an amam. The Asian army immediately heightened its vigilance, surveying the surroundings for protection. However, due to the extreme distance and the mountain range blocking the view, targets were obstructed, and each bullet fired caused the amams to fall one by one. When all had been taken down, the pilot from the other side opened communication with Sheba, informing him of the location he needed to reach and providing a password. Afterward, this pilot fired 2 smoke rounds, creating an opportunity for Kenbu to retreat safely. Thanks to that smoke screen, the Asian army couldn't trace Sheba's tracks. Shortly after, Sheba met the person who had saved him. He expressed his gratitude, introducing himself and Guy. However, Guy appeared grumpy upon realizing there was another artificial intelligence present. The other AI spoke up in greeting, and all 4 got into a transport vehicle and departed. The other AI identified itself as K, while the pilot was introduced as Gashin, who was now intently observing and determining their route. K explained that this road was built before the border war, a remnant of a highway project. The road was funded with private capital and constructed secretly, so the enemy was completely unaware of it, allowing them to move without fear of detection. When it was Sheba's turn, he curiously asked who Gashin was. With a gruff, taciturn demeanor, the man explained that there were currently Japanese people piloting amams and establishing their own army, with the purpose of restoring Japan. Gashin mentioned that his organization was called Yatagarasu. At that moment, Gashin remarked that Sheba had finally met real terrorists. Sheba was then led to the Yatagarasu camp, where he met maintenance workers. Although they verbally disparaged him as weak, they agreed to repair Kenbu. Not long after, a woman appeared and introduced herself as Risa, Gashin's older sister. She was the one who took Sheba to meet Kumai, the leader of Yatagarasu's 2nd unit. After some pleasantries, Kumai began asking Sheba many questions that resembled an interrogation, such as whether he had teammates who had installed Kenbu, or if the artificial intelligence guy was programmed by Sheba himself. Although still perplexed by these questions, Sheba remained calm as he answered. He said that he had found Kenbu in an almost complete state. He had only reinstalled it and wasn't sure if it would work. As for Guy, he had picked it up in the forest, and after connecting it, it had surprisingly activated. Hearing this, Kumai immediately asserted that Kenbu was originally Yatagarasu property, and also revealed that there was another pair of siblings developed based on the Amen platform, piloted by a pilot named Joken. Kumai also added that the reason Kenbu didn't start right away was because it lacked a component that had been scheduled for transport. But both the pilot and the controlling AI had been ambushed, leaving Kenbu dormant until Sheba found and piloted it. Upon hearing this, Guy seemed annoyed and asked if Yatagarasu intended to reclaim Kenbu. Kumai replied that wouldn't be fair to Sheba, and instead offered a different agreement. Sheba could choose to join them. Yatagarasu wasn't a terrorist organization as propaganda claimed, but an insurgent force. They didn't use extreme measures, so they couldn't be called terrorists. Because Sheba had both repair skills and could fight with Kenbu, they believed he was very suitable to join. Sheba hesitated because he knew that if he agreed, he would have to kill people. Gashin became angry at this, emphasizing that Kenbu wasn't a toy but a weapon of war. He showed Sheba a video of many Japanese people being massacred, then criticized him, saying that Sheba held the power to save them in his hands, yet his hesitation was cowardly. Faced with Sheba's indecision, Gashin stormed off angrily. Kumai then explained that Gashin's father had once embraced the aspiration of reviving Japan but had died before fulfilling it, which was why Gashin was so impatient and determined to complete that dying wish as soon as possible. Finally, Kumai left the decision to Sheba, saying he could refuse, and if he wanted, they would still help him reclaim his citizen identity and return to normal life under a different name. But in exchange, Kenbu would have to be returned. Upon hearing this, Sheba remained silent, stating he would need time to think. Leaving that place, he sat pensively in the courtyard. At that moment, Risa came to chat with him. Risa sat down beside him and gently started a conversation. Sheba immediately asked why she had joined the insurgent army. Risa slowly recounted that she once had a happy family, but they all perished in a traffic accident, primarily caused by a military vehicle from the Asian army. Due to diplomatic immunity, those responsible for the deaths weren't punished and instead shifted blame onto her family, forcing them to pay compensation. That memory filled Risa with rage, and she believed many Japanese shared similar grievances, which was why she committed herself to the nation's restoration movement. After hearing this, Sheba muttered that he didn't have a valid reason to join, as his parents had died from illness unrelated to the military. Initially, he viewed assembling Kenbu merely as a hobby, but since fighting alongside Guy and Kenbu, he had felt the excitement of the battlefield, although fear still overwhelmed him when facing death. Risa placed a reassuring hand on him, saying she had been sent to persuade him to join Yatagarasu, but if he were her younger brother, she would only wish for him to live peacefully. Risa advised Sheba to value himself, stating that without someone by their side, people couldn't be happy. These words reminded Sheba of the elderly couple who had once sheltered him, and he gradually formed his own decision. That night, Kumai announced that the Asian army had tightened security after the Kenbu incident, so Yata would temporarily postpone their plans and return to headquarters. Risa mentioned she wasn't sure if Sheba would agree to join, while Gashin still appeared displeased. The next morning, Gashin woke Sheba up for training, providing a list of exercises and starting immediately, forcing Sheba to follow. Meanwhile, Risa took Guy to check the accessories being installed for Kenbu. By the afternoon, Sheba was exhausted, and Gashin merely reminded him that today was just the beginning before walking away. At night, Sheba lay listening to Guy enthusiastically describing Kenbu's greatness but quickly fell asleep. The next day, Gashin called him up again, and by evening, Sheba was utterly exhausted, receiving encouragement from everyone and even a revitalizing drink. A few more days passed, and Sheba gradually adapted, while Guy witnessed each change in Kenbu. One day, Gashin let Sheba finish early. On his way back, he was called by Risa to see Kenbu with its new armor, sword, and artillery, which he couldn't help but admire. Afterward, Risa invited him to the stream, where she casually undressed and pulled Sheba into the water. While bathing, she asked if he had made a decision yet about what to do when they reached Hiroshima. Sheba confessed that he was still afraid to fight, but saw that the people here weren't bad. He would follow them and fight alongside Kenbu. Risa smiled and patted his head encouragingly. That night, Sheba confided in Guy, which responded that it would always support him. Risa also reported back to Kumai. The next day, Sheba and Guy tested the upgraded Kenbu. The machine moved agilely, even slicing a boulder in half. Afterward, Gashin took over the controls, explaining that he needed to be familiar with it in case Sheba died, and also wanted Sheba to try piloting his machine. A practice match was arranged, with Gashin controlling Jogan while AIK assisted Sheba. The match was balanced, with Guy constantly talking, annoying Gashin, while K advised Sheba to change weapons flexibly. When Sheba was distracted, Gashin closed in. K reminded him to use the shield and draw the knife to disarm the opponent. But Gashin still managed to counter, slashing Jogan's shoulder, resulting in a draw. Gashin finally acknowledged Sheba as a genuine pilot. The joy didn't last long, as at that moment, the camp was attacked, with a black AMAM approaching. The black AMAM appeared and first targeted the transport vehicles carrying AMAM parts, wiping them out. After destroying them, it shifted its focus to the insurgent forces. Just as its giant arm was about to strike down, Kenbu rushed in to block it, and the two immediately engaged in combat. Guy noticed that the opponent's arm was generating abnormal heat and reported that there was no data on the structure or features of this type of AMAM, so the crew needed to be extremely cautious. At that moment, Risa came to provide support, but after firing just a few shots, the black AMAM suddenly moved in close and struck her down with a single blow, killing her instantly. The sudden death left Sheba in shock. Guy had to call urgently, demanding that he retreat immediately to avoid the opponent's next attack. Simultaneously, Kamui ordered the two to buy time, saying they needed to delay to evacuate all personnel from the camp. When Gashin realized that the machine before him was the one that had killed his father, he lost his composure. He ignored K's warnings and attacked with full force. Old memories flooded back. He remembered asking his father to let him pilot Jogan instead of the training machine. His father had agreed, thinking there was no risk, and shortly after he left, his unit was ambushed by Aiden. Gashin arrived only in time to see his father fall at the hands of the black machine. He vowed to avenge him at all costs. K warned that his physiological indicators and neural load were exceeding safety thresholds and urged him to restrain himself to maintain precise control of Jogan. The black AMAM swung its weapon directly at Jogan, and Kenbu rushed in to block the blow. Gashin still shouted for Sheba to get out of the way, while Kamui demanded that both cooperate in combat, saying if they lost, everyone in the base would die. K continued with reassuring words and helped Gashin stabilize, though both Guy and K confirmed they had no tactical data on the enemy. The only information gathered was that this machine destroyed everything in its path, causing heavy casualties to both the Asian and North American armies. The military called it Ghost. Ghost opened with a powerful and lightning-fast charge, pushing Kenbu back and then executing a series of combo attacks directed at Sheba. Gashin fired in support, and Ghost unexpectedly retreated, using the gun it had stolen from the insurgent forces to return fire. This confused Sheba because it didn't need identity verification to activate the weapon. K explained that during the confrontation with Gashin's father, Ghost had lost an arm. It had removed an arm from another AMAM, attached it to its body, and considered it its own, thus bypassing identity locks. Ghost continued to move like a phantom. Jogan aimed to shoot, and Kenbu charged in to block its path. Gashin irritably asked Sheba to get out of his line of fire. Guy retorted that if that was the case, he should shoot accurately. Despite the exchange of words, the two retreated in a controlled manner, and their coordination rhythm made Ghost uncomfortable. At this point, Mizuki from the maintenance team communicated to point out the location for weapon delivery. Gashin fired blind rounds to confuse Ghost's sensors. Both Sheba and Gashin accelerated toward the supply coordinates. Ghost, detecting their plan, immediately pursued. The two received their weapons just as Ghost closed in. All three machines assumed defensive positions. Ghost attacked first. Kenbu's heat blade blocked the initial strike, while Jogan provided sniper support. Ghost parried the blow, then accelerated straight toward Jogan. As Kenbu ran to the rescue, Ghost threw Jogan's body at Kenbu. Guy had anticipated this move and directed Kenbu to jump, switch to the gun, and fire continuously from above. As Ghost raised its arm to block, Sheba immediately closed in, severing one of its arms and then pinning its leg with a thrust to immobilize it. Gashin handled the rest. He switched to armor-piercing rounds and fired repeatedly at Ghost's head. Despite its head being severely damaged, Ghost still moved. It jumped behind Kenbu, pushed hard, causing Kenbu to fall onto Jogan, and pinned both to the ground. Then it activated its reactor, preparing for self-destruction. The heat increased rapidly, turning its armor from black to red. Sheba and Gashin were stuck, both thinking they would die, when Kamui directed artillery to their location. He ordered them to target the joints. Once the joints were loosened, Kenbu and Jogan broke free, escaped, and took cover. They waited for Ghost to explode, but it only continued to generate heat without showing signs of detonation. By the afternoon, Kamui reported significant casualties in personnel and equipment. He said they would return to headquarters to report, leaving the cleanup of the battlefield to Gashin and Sheba, with instructions to finish before the Asian army moved in. When sensors no longer detected heat signatures, Gashin and Sheba went outside to inspect. Sheba found Risa's necklace amidst the ruins. He picked it up and began to cry. As night fell, the Asian army appeared, just as Guy had predicted. Among them was a red-haired officer capable of reading the entire battle from the traces left behind. This person seemed surprised by Sheba's progress. When he realized that Sheba had managed to confront Ghost, he became even more eager to meet him. Sheba remained immersed in grief over Risa. Gashin understood and didn't pressure him, having experienced a similar tragedy. The red-haired officer compiled information on the three MANIS, concluding that Kenbu was the original model. Jogan was a sniper configuration, while Ghost's specifications remained unclear. He speculated that Ghost had removed all limitations, and possibly the AI inside had evolved on its own. Then he called his teammate named Jay to prepare an AI for the next mission. The next morning, while with Guy, Sheba told Gashin directly that he had decided not to join the insurgent army anymore because the fear of death constantly surrounded him. This time, Gashin didn't argue. He replied that he would report back to Kamui and clearly stated that if Sheba didn't participate in combat, he wouldn't be allowed to continue piloting Kenbu. He asked him to hide Kenbu in a discreet location and then send the position. Before parting, Sheba told Gashin to take care. Gashin said his life was his own to decide. Sheba blurted out that he was very afraid of dying, but watching acquaintances die one by one was even more frightening. Gashin dismissed this, saying a coward had no right to discuss death. Finally, Sheba took Kenbu to hide near a nearby stream. Once completed, he left with Guy, his heart heavy with what had happened, but still clear-headed enough to fulfill what he had promised. When Sheba emerged from the forest, thanks to Guy's skillful overwriting of information on his ID card and wanted notice, he wasn't recognized by the surrounding locals, thus reducing their suspicion of him. While the two were moving, Guy asked Sheba what he planned to do next. Sheba replied that he wanted to go to Risa's house to return her necklace, and although he didn't know if any family remained, he guessed she must still have relatives. Guy, having already searched for information about the past accident involving Risa's family, quickly found the address. Sheba thanked it, and both shared a relieved smile before continuing their journey together. Elsewhere, two individuals dressed identically to the red-haired officer were discussing their plans. They were framing Japanese people as criminals and then playing heroes by suppressing them, thereby achieving merit and glory. To them, Japanese lives were no different from barbarians, merely tools to display their power. Meanwhile, Sheba had found the address Guy provided. Before him was only a completely leveled house with no trace of life remaining. Thinking Risa might still have relatives somewhere, he planned to ask around, but everyone who saw him avoided him, their eyes fearful as if seeing something evil. Amid his confusion, a little girl approached asking if he was a friend of Risa's. Immediately after, a stern-faced man walked up, scrutinizing and asking who he was. Sheba introduced himself and presented the necklace. The man fell silent upon seeing it, then led him away. In the car, he explained that Risa's house had been destroyed by the Asian army. All her relatives were gone, and she herself was rumored to have joined the insurgent army. This order came from the newly appointed governor's representative, who not only hunted people down but also terrorized their relatives. Many other families shared the same fate, which was essentially a comprehensive suppression. He took Sheba to a night eatery where several of Risa's childhood friends had gathered. These people were smiling as they recounted happy memories, unaware of the cruel truth. But then Sheba had to tell them that Risa was gone forever. When the news was spoken, the group froze. Some burst into tears, all remembering Risa's kind heart and her readiness to help others. They asked Sheba what he would do next. He replied that since he didn't know where her relatives were, he would place the necklace on her family's grave. The answer silenced the table until the restaurant owner said she knew the grave's location, up in the mountains and quite time-consuming to reach. Therefore, she suggested Sheba stay overnight, as she didn't want a child wandering around in the evening. Initially, he wanted to refuse, but everyone hoped he would stay, even deciding they would all visit the grave together. Sheba agreed to stay, and everyone immediately cheered. They organized a hot pot meal, and Uncle Nose also attended with his daughter. Just as the meal ended, the father and daughter left the restaurant. While crossing at a green light, the governor's car suddenly appeared. He lowered the window and brazenly blamed the uncle for dirtying his coat. Elsewhere, the red-haired officer had received a new machine model and was extremely excited, eagerly awaiting the day to pilot it and hunt down Kenbu and Ghost. At this time, Ghost was hiding in a cave, self-repairing. The next day, news spread that Uncle Nose and his daughter had disappeared. When people went to their house, all possessions had been cleared out, leaving confusion. One of Risa's friends mentioned a rumor that anyone who caught the governor's eye would disappear overnight, taken to the mainland, not unlike being sold to Cambodia. Guy and Sheba heard it all clearly. Guy analyzed camera data, noting no military vehicles had left the city, meaning Uncle Nose was still within range. However, Sheba lacked the credibility to convince everyone, so Guy revealed someone's personal secret as proof, making them believe. The group decided to go to the governor's place to demand the return of the missing persons. This information was immediately reported to Kamui, who both sympathized with Sheba and informed him that upon returning to headquarters, Sheba would have a new teammate, a pilot who owned a design based on Kenbu. At the governor's residence, he and his subordinates were discussing plans to sell Uncle Nose as forced labor and give his daughter to depraved individuals. Just then, news came that Japanese people were gathering outside to protest. Sheba chose to stay at the restaurant, but soon after, word came that the protest group had been arrested, charged with anti-government activities. Guy tracked and discovered many military vehicles had left, heading toward residential areas for arrests. Guy urgently told Sheba to leave the restaurant, while the owner gave him the location of Risa's grave, asking him to send her regards. She threw him out just before the military arrived. Uncle Nose's group was all captured, led through the streets, and sentenced to death. Sheba watched through his phone screen, his heart constricting when he saw someone shot dead on the spot. He broke down crying, realizing his cowardice, only knowing how to run away and abandon those who had extended their hands to help him. At this moment, Guy advised that if Sheba hated his weakness, why not change to become better, and it would always be there to support him. Those words awakened Sheba, strengthening his resolve. From the stream where Kenbu was hidden, the light from its mechanical eyes flashed. That afternoon, as the group was about to be executed, the ground shook and Kenbu rushed out, raising its shield. The governor panicked and ordered an attack, but those were hardly worthy of being called amems. Sheba easily subdued them, grabbing one and throwing it into another. Then, he delivered a giant punch close to the governor, making him tremble and beg for his life. At that moment, Guy disseminated all evidence of his human trafficking worldwide, exposing the naked truth. The red-haired officer observed the scene from afar, only laughing loudly and uttering words of praise. Sheba warned that if the governor dared to touch Japanese people again, he would come to his house every night. With that, Sheba left, and Uncle Nose and his daughter were freed. Early the next morning, Sheba arrived at the rendezvous with Guy, carefully placing the necklace on the grave of Risa's family, bidding a silent farewell. Long ago, in a village specializing in pottery, a little girl named Shinofan followed her grandfather to learn the delicate lines needed to create beautiful ceramic products. Under his skillful and patient hands, seemingly lifeless clay transformed into exquisite works, carrying his lifelong dedication. However, a major calamity occurred. One day, the Asian army suddenly arrived, brazenly confiscating the family's land and workshop. They gave her grandfather no chance to refuse or resist. Everything became cold commands. He could only helplessly watch as the workshop he had built over a lifetime was completely destroyed. From that day, he no longer had the strength to hold clay. His passion was buried alongside the broken pottery pieces. Seeing this, little Shin couldn't help but feel heartbroken, making a promise that someday she would restore the family workshop to fulfill her grandfather's unfinished wish. Returning to the present, the situation for Sheba's group was extremely difficult. Both Jogan and Kenbu were in a state of disrepair, with many critical components damaged, limiting their operation. Not only that, but both Guy and Kei also needed to be charged if they were to continue providing support. During this time, Guy immediately contacted Mizuki for help. She very much wanted to assist, but was also in a difficult situation, having to avoid pursuit by the Asian army while rushing back to headquarters. Therefore, she could only provide information about the location of necessary components for them to find replacements and make repairs before continuing their journey. Sheba anxiously asked Guy what he should do next, and Guy quickly led him to find a power source, risking danger by stealing electricity to charge the two eyes. Afterward, they carefully disguised Jogan and Kenbu to let them rest, then entered the city together to find a place to stay. When entering the hotel, Sheba, though originally from the city, felt somewhat awkward as this was his first time here. He was immediately teased by Guy for being a country bumpkin, causing Sheba to try to refute, but then be reminded not to draw attention in this situation. After checking in, they went to their room. Kay then advised both to take a shower immediately, as their bodies emitted an unpleasant odor. Sheba was surprised to hear this. He didn't think everyone could smell the odor, but Kay calmly replied that it didn't need to use its sensors, just looking at the reactions of those around them was enough. Indeed, everyone had to cover their noses when standing near them. So as soon as they entered the room, both immediately tried to scrub themselves thoroughly clean. After bathing, they went down to the streets to find food. During the meal, Guy received a notification from Mizuki that the necessary components had been sent, and tomorrow they would begin the repair process. Hearing this news, Sheba became more cheerful and started eating heartily. However, he quickly noticed that Guy wasn't touching the vegetables and questioned this. Kay explained that Guy was a picky eater, and Sheba inadvertently teased him about it. This made Guy display an annoyed attitude. Sheba realized he had misspoken and hurriedly apologized, confessing that because he had no friends before, he wasn't accustomed to social interaction. Kay and Guy then told him not to worry, as Guy's gruffness was just a way to hide the weakness inside. Nevertheless, the three couldn't avoid some minor arguments. Meanwhile, on another front, the European army, after hearing Sheba's provocative speech and suffering a strong blow to their economy and honor from Asia, had begun intensively preparing for a major military conflict. In their hearts arose the hope that the flower of the battlefield would bloom brightly with blood and gunpowder. The next day, Guy and Sheba took a bus to get the components. On the way, Guy told Sheba to look down at the Japanese city, now completely dominated, where people lived under oppression and poverty. He said that one day, he would reclaim this land. Afterward, both stopped at a bar where insurgent forces operated secretly. When Guy recited the correct password, the owner handed over the goods and expressed hope in Sheba after hearing his speech. However, just as they left, an explosion sounded from the direction of the port. The European army had brazenly brought in AMAMs to attack the area controlled by the Asian army. The Asian army counterattacked, but weakly and insignificantly. Guy and Sheba quickly blended into the evacuating crowd to observe. The Oceanian army fired indiscriminately, regardless of civilians, making the situation more chaotic. Upon reaching the gathering area, Guy analyzed that the Asian army might no longer prioritize civilian evacuation, but instead focus all forces on defense. Sheba couldn't accept this and wanted to find a way to help, and Guy agreed. They immediately hacked into civilian communication devices to direct evacuation routes. Not stopping there, Kay and Guy also took control of all the city's display screens, guiding people to the correct escape paths. But the Oceanian army's attack speed was too fast. There was fear they wouldn't make it in time. Sheba suggested using Kenbu for support, but Guy analyzed that if they went back to get it and then returned, no one would survive. The Asian commander at this point even abandoned the civilians, considering their deaths would become an excuse for international public opinion to turn against Oceania. People desperately tried to escape the building, but were prevented by Asian soldiers. Just then, a wrecked Asian AMAM was thrown at them, destroying the entire building and causing panic among the civilians. Then the Oceanian forces slowly closed in. In a moment that seemed hopeless, another AMAM suddenly appeared. It moved with extraordinary speed, in the blink of an eye slipping into the middle of the enemy formation. It called itself Reiki, acting in the name of justice. Right after the introduction, Reiki sliced an AMAM in half, then jumped high, used the enemy's body as a shield, and continued to thrust forward, taking down 3 more AMAMs. Not stopping there, it turned to wipe out the Asian soldiers, then charged straight toward the artillery, swiftly defeating them. In just moments, the maps of both commanding sides were filled with red dots signaling destroyed forces, with casualty rates reaching 70%, forcing the Oceanian army to hastily retreat. Sheba and Guy witnessed this with astonishment, their mouths agape at the terrifying power. Guy then announced that this was their new teammate. Receiving orders to assemble, they immediately left, moving deep into a forest as evening fell. There, they saw Reiki with their own eyes. Sheba spoke up in greeting, but the other Amame interrupted, introducing itself as Angelo with an arrogant tone. It claimed to love women and hate men, even forcing Guy and Sheba to bow their heads in gratitude for being saved by it. After a tirade of scolding, Angelo finally showed them its pilot. From the cockpit stepped out a girl, none other than Shin. She came down, not uttering a word, only bursting into tears to everyone's astonishment. Afterward, all three were taken back to the nearby Yatagarasu base. In the group, Shin was the first to speak up, expressing embarrassment about her rather strange greeting with tears. Then, she took the initiative to introduce herself and chatted with Sheba. In contrast, Ji maintained his cold exterior, gruff temperament, and didn't say much. From what Shin shared, Sheba and Guy learned that the morning battle was her first real combat experience. Previously, her main job was only as a maintenance worker for Yatagarasu. But then Angelo suddenly appeared and said she should become a pilot. Without hesitation, she agreed immediately, because according to her, he had great confidence in his ability to judge people. However, Guy and Kay teased that Angelo was actually just obsessed with women. The atmosphere between the three later became lively as they began joking loudly, giving Guy a tremendous headache. Elsewhere, Watt and his close friend went to meet the commander. The commander called them in to announce that Ghost's position had been identified. According to sources, Ghost was definitely an unmanned machine with artificial intelligence capable of independent thinking. However, the one controlling it remained a mystery. Ghost had successively defeated forces from North America, Asia, Eurasia, and Oceania. Because of this, high-level leaders all coveted Ghost to gain advantage in the war. The boss ordered Watt and his friend to find it at all costs, and if there was an opportunity, to destroy it immediately to prevent it from falling into the hands of other powers. After discussing official business, he moved on to personal matters. Surprisingly, this commander was Watt's biological father. He instructed his son to take time to go home during the upcoming holiday, as his mother was always longing to see him. Watt nodded in agreement, then left. However, in the car, his companion understood very well that Watt would again bury himself in work during the break, as there were too many missions he needed to complete. On the way, Watt stopped at a familiar bakery. The shop owner happily gave him extra pastries, as he knew the North American alliance wanted to revive Japan. But Watt understood that control would still remain in the hands of the North American military. Even if the country regained autonomy, the control center would not escape their grip. Watt worried that Japan would gradually become a colony, and he didn't want the people to forever rely on outside powers. They needed to stand up themselves to reclaim what belonged to them. After eating, the two continued on their way. In the car, Watt confided that it wasn't that he didn't want to go home, but that he was adopted. The other children in the house were in the same situation, but he found it difficult to integrate with them. He recounted that he had almost found nothing that interested him until he joined the military. The first time he saw an Ameme, he decided to choose a military career. The story had just ended when they arrived at the mission location, rejoining Sheba's group. Sheba's group stopped at a luxury hotel to rest. At this point, Sheba raised a question about why the three AI companions differed from military Amemes. Angelo explained that behind this difference was a company named Brenzon. Nominally, the company was headquartered in Europe and was currently supporting insurgent organizations in Japan. However, no one was sure if this company had any shadowy agenda. They only knew that so far, everything seemed fine. Additionally, the eyes they used were originally established by an external agency called ILS, short for Intelligence Learning System. Among them, Guy was a special case. Although sharing the same source code with Kay and Angelo, he was sent to the Oceania region by someone. Nevertheless, all three were considered brothers. When back in the room, Sheba asked Guy if he had ever wondered why he was sent there. But Guy just said he didn't care because he was content with his current circumstances. Meanwhile, Watt met two new teammates, Roger and Sophia, who would assist him in the campaign to eliminate Ghost. However, Sophia expressed concern and objection, believing that using human pilots to confront AI was too risky. Watt calmly explained that if they used another method, they would need to mobilize an entire company, which was unfeasible while Asian and Oceanian forces were still lurking. Therefore, the superiors had gathered elite individuals to deal with Ghost. The fact that Sophia was chosen proved she was very skilled, and what she needed to do now was simply follow orders. If she listened, Ghost would be just like a normal Ameme, but if not, the consequences would be unpredictable. The next day, Sheba's group set off to return to headquarters by air, while Watt's group also began their operation. Ghost seemed to sense their presence from inside the cave. It immediately rushed to the surface, and Watt promptly descended to that position. The battle erupted when Ghost actively attacked. Watt commanded the formation to split up, surrounding it from multiple directions. Initially, this tactic proved effective, as Ghost struggled against a formation of all-man machines, something it had never faced before. But in just moments, Ghost quickly adapted. It focused on targeting Watt's companion, forcing him to retreat with difficulty. Roger tried to support, but was also blocked by Ghost, who then used its strength to throw Watt's friend into him. Outside forces launched missile attacks, but Ghost emitted jamming signals that made the flight paths deviate. Roger continued to attack but was caught. A third arm grew from Ghost's back, forcing Roger to abandon one of his arms to escape. Ghost had now fully adapted to Watt's tactics and was preparing to crush him. Meanwhile, Guy suddenly sensed killing intent, something that others besides Sheba couldn't perceive. Initially, he thought it was just an illusion and ignored it. Back on the battlefield, Ghost used fingers carrying chains to attack the pilots. During Roger's carelessness, one finger pierced through, killing him from the inside. Unable to grieve for too long, Watt immediately recalculated, then charged forward with his two remaining teammates. Sophie and the other friend went first, creating a blind spot to cover Ghost's vision. But both were quickly bound by ropes growing from the ground. Watt still determinedly rushed forward. When Ghost fired, he immediately dodged, then jumped back, shooting directly at its arm joint. However, Ghost managed to block and counterattack. At that moment, a bullet unexpectedly hit its leg joint. It was from Roger. Although he had died, his AI continued to operate, completing the mission. Thanks to this, Watt fired the decisive shot through Ghost's chest, causing it to fall. The battle seemed over, but just seconds later, Ghost surprisingly escaped in a military aircraft. Watt was furious, vowing that sooner or later, he would destroy it. Meanwhile, Sheba's group had reached headquarters and met the Yatagarasu representative. He was delighted to see all three safe, but there was still a mission for them. Someone wanted to meet all three. He was the intermediary between the Brenzon company and the organization. He appeared, introducing himself and offering cooperation, a cooperation based on war itself. Everyone sat down to discuss. Gobel maintained a cheerful exterior, his eyes exuding the confidence of a seasoned businessman. He expressed interest in long-term cooperation with Yatagarasu and Sheba's group, firmly asserting that as long as war continued, his company would have business opportunities. This also meant that as long as the world remained engulfed in flames, supplies and support would always be ready. Gobel also showed he knew how to win people over, generously promising to provide money whenever they needed, as long as they could maintain this cooperative relationship. Not stopping there, Gobel also brought them a series of new equipment specifically for the Amiens. He led everyone to a compartment where various advanced weapons and components were neatly arranged. For Jogan, Gobel introduced a pair of heavy armored grenade launchers, capable of penetrating even the hardest defensive layers. For Kenbu and Reiki, he provided many other reinforcement parts, from joints and armor shields to expanded sensor systems. Looking at how Gobel displayed and explained, it was clear he wasn't simply selling goods, but wanted to assert the prestige of Brenzon Company as a hidden force behind every conflict. During this time, Yudo received a call from his superiors and quickly took Sheba's group onward. They were driven to a small village deep in the forest, remote and isolated from the chaos outside. Here, the group was led into an old but sturdy house belonging to a person named Yuyu. He was once a long-time real estate professional, now living temporarily with the villagers to avoid the bombing. Yuyu opened the genealogical data for them to see. Currently, 9 people lived here. However, just a week ago, the village had completely lost its electricity and water, making daily life extremely difficult. While talking, a little girl suddenly ran up, hugged Gashin, and called him father. Everyone was surprised, while Yuyu apologetically explained that the girl had lost her father at a young age, so she sometimes mistakenly called people that. Everyone nodded, trying to show understanding. Returning to the main issue, Yuyu shared that the people here had been exiled multiple times. Their old town had experienced war, forcing them to relocate to a refugee camp. But then the camp was also closed. Finally, with nowhere else to go, they returned to this remote area, accepting a life of deprivation in exchange for some safety. After hearing this, Yuyu affirmed that Yatagarasu would try to help as much as possible. That night, the group set up camp to stay. Sheba quietly watched the children playing, feeling admiration for Yuyu's kindness. Gashin took the opportunity to add that Yata wasn't just an insurgent army, but also a support for their compatriots, trying to build people's trust. Because to restore the country, they couldn't rely on weapons alone, but also needed solidarity. The next morning, it rained. Everyone gathered to discuss solutions for the village. The three major issues to solve were electricity, water, and food. Kamui proposed an overall plan: drilling wells to find water sources, building water wheels to generate electricity, and cultivating land for farming. After hearing this, everyone immediately got to work. Sheba and some young men went to salvage machinery from old cars, while Yuyu asked Gobel to sponsor more equipment. Gobel nodded in agreement immediately, because even though it was charity, he still considered it a profitable investment. The bustling atmosphere of labor spread throughout the village. Some built houses, others dug wells, and another group prepared the farmland. By evening, everyone sat down to eat together in a warm and united atmosphere. Sheba watched the children playing, gradually feeling peaceful. The next day, while Sheba was arranging wood, Shin called him to follow her up the mountain. There was an old hut and an abandoned kiln. Shin expressed her desire to repair this kiln because, if successful, they could bake bread, make pizza, and even create pottery. She mentioned that her family had a tradition of pottery making, and Sheba immediately offered to help. They began the work of restoring the kiln. While working, two village children came by, curious to see, and were invited by Shin to participate. Days passed with the group working diligently. Finally, the kiln was completed. Under Shin's guidance, Sheba and the two children molded many simple utensils like cups, bowls, and plates. They just needed to be fired and painted to be usable. On the other side, Gashin's group had received new equipment, only stuck at the well drilling stage. But here, they encountered a hard rock layer 2 meters thick. Not giving up, Mizuki proposed a solution, creating a device combining rock melting laser beams and penetrating piles to break through the barrier. Since this idea was suggested by Guy, it made Sheba directly implement it. Initially hesitant, Sheba eventually stepped up. Under the guidance of the three eyes, he adjusted the laser precisely, then lowered the activation lever. Guy even made him shout the technique's name for spirit, and Sheba reluctantly yelled, "Super Iron Drill Breakthrough." Laughter mixed with anticipation rang out. Then the underground water gushed forth. Taking advantage of the water power, they accelerated the wheel, generating a stable electrical current. The lights in the village lit up, followed by jubilant cheers. The villagers bowed in gratitude, while Sheba and his teammates felt a simple happiness. They weren't just fighting but truly bringing life to people amidst the smoke and fire. Afterward, Shin gave the children pottery that had been painted with cute designs, making them very happy. After the trip, the group of three Sheba, Gashin, and Shin continued to receive a familiar mission: purchasing necessary supplies for members of the Yatagarasu organization. As always, everything had to be conducted in secret to avoid drawing attention. The shopping list was exceedingly long, making them wonder when they would ever finish. While they were walking, someone unexpectedly recognized Gashin. It was Yuyu. The three stopped in the park to chat, and Sheba was quite surprised to see that Gashin had such a close brother, as this was the first time he had seen such a natural smile on Gashin's face. During their conversation, Gashin explained that Yuyu had once worked at Yatagarasu headquarters with his parents, and after they had sacrificed themselves in the battle against the Asian army, Gashin's father had adopted Yuyu. Gashin had since treasured and regarded Yuyu as his own blood. When Yuyu suddenly left the organization, it had left Gashin with a profound sadness that lasted for quite some time. After sharing their thoughts, Yuyu bid the group farewell, with the brothers exchanging contact information before Yuyu departed. Back at headquarters, Gashin took out a photo of himself with his father and Yuyu, and childhood memories suddenly flooded back. He recalled when they were young and got lost in the mountain. He had been trembling with fear, but Yuyu had stayed by his side to comfort and protect him. Though not related by blood, Yuyu had always been his support and protector, memories that would never fade from Gashin's mind. The next morning, Sheba's group tested their new equipment, and everything operated smoothly. At that moment, Gashin received a message from Yuyu, which made him happy, and he invited Sheba and Shin to join him. Yuyu led the three to a city he had built. where all residents were Japanese, with no presence of people from the Asian Cooperative. Although not officially recognized, the place had more than 3,482 inhabitants, equivalent to a small town. Notably, self-governance belonged to the Japanese, and Yuyu was the leader of this autonomous region. The people here deeply respected him, while Yuyu himself only wished to see children's innocent smiles and protect everyone's peace. He explained that his reason for leaving Yatagarasu was because his path didn't align with the organization's. He chose negotiation over fighting. Managing an autonomous region was certainly not easy. Every day, he had to negotiate with the Asian army, but he still hoped the city could expand further in the future. Afterward, Yuyu had to leave, letting the three freely explore, and as they wandered around, they received many gifts from the residents who knew they were acquaintances of Yuyu. Sheba and Shin climbed a high hill to view the panorama of the city, while Gashin went to meet Yuyu privately after a meeting. Yuyu directly expressed his hope that his younger brother would leave Yatagarasu to live with him here. He explained that the autonomous region's population had reached its threshold, but he could ask the Asian army for special consideration for Gashin, so he wouldn't have to hold a gun anymore and could live peacefully. Gashin didn't answer immediately, only asking for more time to think. Upon returning to headquarters, he was surprisingly approached by Gobel, who revealed a shocking truth. Gobel said that because he feared losing Gashin would affect his company's revenue, he had to clarify that Yuyu was actually a spy for the Asian army. He told Gashin to believe it or not as he chose, but emphasized that information was also a traded commodity, and once provided, it wasn't incorrect. Gobel further analyzed that just by thinking, one would know the Asian army wouldn't allow Yuyu to establish such a large autonomous region if he wasn't working from within for them. According to him, Yuyu might have exploited land acquisition, provided information, even pointed out rebels or accepted bribes, and sometimes even used blackmail tactic. He warned that the brother Gashin cherished was protecting Japanese people by betraying them, and if Gashin maintained contact, sooner or later all of Yatagarasu's information would be exposed. Losing one pilot was already a significant loss, let alone three. Gobel advised him to consider carefully to avoid serious consequences, and if still doubtful, to verify it himself. After hearing this, Gashin left with a heavy heart. In the dark room, he instructed Sheba not to reveal this to anyone. He remembered a time when he had lost his tea and sat silently without saying a word, and it was Yuyu who came to comfort him. Therefore, he didn't want to believe his brother would betray him. The next day, Gashin secretly returned to the city to investigate. Just by observing once around, he noticed many abnormalities. Supplies from medical to essential goods were scarce, with residents constantly complaining. Going deeper, Gashin witnessed Asian army vehicles stopping in front of Yuyu's office, using essential goods to pressure him into providing information. Although clearly not part of the agreement, Yuyu was forced to comply. The entire scene was recorded by Gashin's camera. After the Asian army withdrew, Yuyu thought for a while, then proactively called Gashin. The two met outside the autonomous region and then went to headquarters together. There, Yuyu met Kamui and Yudo, frankly admitting that he had cooperated with the Asian army to establish the city, while warning that they were trying to extract information to destroy Yatagarasu. He feared the autonomous region would be turned into a military base, so he advised them to withdraw their forces. After speaking, Yuyu returned to avoid suspicion, declining the invitation to stay. However, his car unexpectedly broke down. The mechanic reported it would take a day to fix, so Yuyu had to stay overnight. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, Yuyu secretly copied Yatagarasu's data, but as he tried to sneak away, he was intercepted by Gashin. The two brothers argued intensely, with Yuyu asserting he only wanted to protect the people and couldn't let them die hopelessly, while Gashin couldn't betray the organization he was committed to. The exchange of words brought no consensus, and Yuyu decided to turn his back and leave. In that moment, Gashin raised his gun and pointed it at his brother, but his trembling arm wouldn't allow him to pull the trigger. In the following days, the group of three Sheba, Gashin, and Shin continued their journey across the sea, heading to meet the Tauhoku organization, an insurgent group operating similarly to Yatagarasu, but completely independent. They had to separate from Yudo and Kumai, following a route previously discussed with Gobel, who had emphasized that Tauhoku was also a group trying to revive Japan, but was currently being ruthlessly hunted by the Eurasian army. Gobel warned that although Tauhoku had combat experience, their forces had significantly diminished, and without external support, the risk of annihilation was almost certain. Not long after, the group of 3 spotted the island where Taohoku was hiding but immediately noticed the critical situation. The Eurasian army had deployed formidable forces, using AMAIMs with cutting-edge technology to suppress Taohoku. From above, smoke and fire billowed, gunshots and engine noises echoed across the island, creating a chaotic scene that seemed to offer no escape. The remaining members of Taohoku were resisting desperately, but the enemy's superior numbers and strength made the situation increasingly dire. When Sheba's group approached, they immediately deployed coordinated tactics to support Taohoku. Gashin stood in a sniping position from afar, using his positioning and precision shooting abilities to take down a series of enemy AMAIMs, creating space for his teammates to move. Reiki and Kenbu soared in the air, combining direct attacks and intercepting AMAIMs from above, their blades slicing around, creating vortices of damage. However, the enemy forces were too numerous, continuously closing in, forcing Gashin to use smoke bombs to create a screen, temporarily retreat, and deceive the recognition systems. From the Eurasian command, Major Zelenoi was sipping tea to the sound of classical Russian music, lamenting the luxurious life, observing the entire scene from a high position, his relaxed laughter echoing as he witnessed the chaos. He showed pleasure and told himself that next time he would personally enter the battlefield to witness his own military achievements, considering this a personal challenge. Zelenoi's confidence worried his female officer assistant, but he remained firm with this approach, as he believed this work was merely playing with little mice, so he had no ideas. After temporarily escaping the dangerous area, the group of 3 met Taohoku's commander, who expressed deep gratitude as their timely appearance had saved the remaining members. Sheba observed that Taohoku's current forces were very few compared to before. Kono, a veteran member of Taohoku, explained that since Zelenoi took command, he had forcefully deployed AMAIMs and modern military tactics to hunt down and eliminate most of Taohoku's members, forcing the organization to retreat to remote islands for hiding. Kono's next plan was to gather the remaining forces to the east of the island, where there were Taohoku-affiliated groups, to consolidate their strength. Guy proposed scanning the entire surrounding area to assess the terrain and establish hiding points, aiming to increase the chances of success for the upcoming campaign. All 3 divided to scout, each escorted by a small group to ensure safety. When Sheba observed from above, he noticed strange light columns, which the escort explained were enemy signal devices that only recognized AMAIMs. If turned off, it would be considered as having detected a target. Sheba quickly determined this was a weakness that could be exploited to create an advantage for his group, while Zelenoi remained confident that Sheba's group wouldn't escape, despite his secretary's objection, who believed they had already secured victory and didn't need to showcase their power. When a thick fog covered the forest, Zelenoi ordered AMAIMs to advance and sweep, firing randomly to locate Sheba's group. Gashin immediately deployed smoke bombs to jam signals, while Zelenoi activated the signal columns to locate them. Sheba's group was forced into a point, but by hacking the system and exploiting the jammed signals, their position signals disappeared, creating conditions for Kenbu and Reiki to fly out from 2 sides to eliminate enemies. Hacking into the opponent's system was too easy, helping Sheba's group simulate positions and hide their real actions, causing the enemy to be disoriented and lose direction. After dealing with the smaller AMAIMs and temporarily controlling the situation, the 3 pilots headed straight to Zelenoi's position. Angelo and Guy charged forward for a direct attack. Kei fired support from behind, taking down 2 pursuing enemies. Kenbu clashed swords with Zelenoi. Reiki flew up to support but was shot back, forcing it to dodge. Zelenoi tried to attack Kenbu, but Reiki slashed his gun, creating an important tactical opening. Despite being attacked from multiple sides, Zelenoi counterattacked, but the blade and armor of his AMAIM were damaged, forcing Gashin to decide to retreat rather than eliminate him, causing Zelenoi to be bitter, considering this an insult to his personal dignity and noble status. After Kono's group merged with the remaining Taohoku forces, Sheba's group bid farewell to their allies and boarded a ship to regroup with Kamui's team. This journey had helped Gashin mature even more. Not long after the trip, the 3 Sheba, Gashin, and Shin met with the maintenance team to prepare for the AMAIM maintenance session. However, before handing all the machinery over to the maintenance team, Sheba asked permission to clean Kenbu first as the machine was quite dirty, and its hygienic condition concerned him, especially in the area near Wat, where all activities were strictly monitored. He explained that caring for Kenbu was necessary to ensure operational efficiency and safety during maintenance, and the maintenance team agreed with this reason. While Sheba focused on Kenbu, Gobel had contacted him through a secret channel, suggesting a special transaction. Gobel, with a tactful approach, didn't reveal his true identity, but only said that he was a merchant and that his merchandise was information, something extremely valuable in this time of widespread war. To prove his reliability, he provided all the information about Watt, Sophia, and Watt's companion. He asked Gobel about the value to be paid for this information, and Gobel asserted that no money was needed, considering this a long-term investment to build a relationship between the two parties in the future. After the information was fully transmitted, Gobel left, but before disappearing, he sent all the data to Watt for analysis and preparation for upcoming campaigns. Meanwhile, Yuyu received notification from the maintenance team about the 3 pilots' condition, and he decided to let all 3 rest temporarily after continuous days of intense work. Temporarily disconnecting communication also helped the pilot team relax and mentally prepare for the next missions. During the rest, Yuyu announced that guests had arrived, and the pilot group, while keeping the ames, chatted about the future of Japan when the country would be restored. Shin expressed her desire to rebuild her family's pottery workshop in her hometown, where she could continue her family's long-standing tradition, while Gashin still had to face the mission of avenging his father. Feeling this was a responsibility he couldn't refuse, Sheba listened, then promised to support Gashin in taking down Ghost, while Shin also decided to help. Gashin just smiled gently, a rare smile on his lips, both discreet and confident, as if he was ready for the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, Zelenoi, after being accidentally hit by children from Sheba's team, had returned to report to his superior commander and requested to be transferred to the team hunting down the Yatagarasu organization, as he believed this was an opportunity to demonstrate his abilities and regain his damaged reputation after the recent battle. His superior agreed, creating conditions for Zelenoi to begin his plan to hunt down Yatagarasu with the highest determination. Yuyu, in the meantime, had met again with Kamui, who had helped him gather information. Uncle Kamui had shown Yuyu several photos related to Asian army soldiers injured in unclear circumstances, suggesting they might have been attacked by other forces, which was important evidence for analyzing future strategies. After setting aside this information, Yuyu presented to Kamui a map of Japan's current state, where control was shared by 4 major powers. He explained that if Yatagarasu's campaigns continued to be implemented, the territory under their control would expand, although nominally, control would still belong to the North American Alliance, while internal autonomy would be given to Japan. What particularly excited Watt was that for a long time, these 4 powers had never conquered each other to expand territory, but recently the situation had completely changed, mainly due to an extremely important factor: the original Kenbu, the AI that developed and learned on its own, even surpassing some other eyes. Ghost also possessed a similar AI, but Kenbu's power and adaptability made Watt increasingly eager to control it. He decided to cooperate with Gobel to ensure mutual benefits and maximize the strategic potential of both. Some time later, intelligence confirmed with 90% certainty that Ghost was still in the Asian cooperatives area. Since Ghost had adapted to old tactics, Watt understood they needed to prepare a new approach to deal with this AI. He asked Sophie, an intelligence specialist, about Sheba's group's location. But Sophie said this group had learned to hide themselves very well, and currently had many different movement directions, making it difficult to determine their exact location. After some thought, Watt led his 2 teammates outside to relax, get some fresh air, and prepare mentally for the next steps. Meanwhile, Sheba and Misuzu conducted maintenance on Kenbu, after which the entire Sheba group, including Shin and Gashin, disguised themselves to go to the market to purchase necessary supplies. Upon arrival, the group split up to shop individually. Sheba, experiencing the bustling market atmosphere for the first time, accidentally bumped into Watt. He quickly apologized and was about to retreat, but Watt recognized Sheba's voice from before, so he had someone follow and cross-check information to confirm his identity. After shopping, dusk had fallen, and Misuzu led the group to a hot spring to relax and rest. When they arrived, they were divided into male and female areas, creating favorable conditions for rest. However, Sheba met Watt again here, and he didn't beat around the bush, but frankly revealed that he was from the North American Army, while also disclosing his mission to capture Ghost that he had undertaken but failed, allowing Ghost to escape the encirclement. Watt also pointed out Ghost's current location, information that strongly impacted Gashin's psychology. preventing him from wondering or asking any further questions, as he understood the importance of this information and the danger that Ghost posed. In the hot spring, with only the sound of flowing water and rising steam in the quiet space, Sheba sensed the silent tension within the group. Each person was thinking about the next strategy, about protecting teammates and civilians, about plans to restore the country. Shin maintained a serious demeanor, focused on observing all actions around, while Gashin silently calculated the most logical steps to deal with Ghost. Watt probed their attitudes for a while, then brazenly stood up and left, leaving Gashin with a tense face. The temporary base quickly connected with the representative, reporting the new situation when facing the North American military forces and providing news related to Ghost. During the report, Gashin directly expressed his desire to destroy Ghost to avenge his father's death, stating that if he couldn't do this, he wouldn't be able to move forward and continue with important plans ahead. The representative listened carefully, then asked for Sheba's opinion, who still carried self-blame for Risa's sacrifice when the previous camp was attacked by Ghost. Sheba explained that the event had left a deep psychological wound, and if Gashin wanted to carry out the mission to destroy Ghost, he would contribute his utmost ability. Yudo listened to everything, ensuring that everyone else would also rest until the information was fully confirmed. While waiting, Gashin continued to train in the Jogan area, causing concern among those around him, as continuous training was both stressful and draining. Shin worried about him and couldn't focus on pottery. 2 days later, intelligence results confirmed that the accuracy of the information regarding Ghost was extremely high, showing that this AI was operating at Okanashima, within the jurisdiction of the Asian Army, where they had built a patrol base on both Dugajima and Nishinoshima, based on battle traces and movement images recorded from the nearby port. Along with changing power consumption on the island, analyses confirmed that Ghost was present on Nishinoshima and had taken control of the air defense system. The Asian army had withdrawn, and forces on the mainland couldn't send reinforcements to the island, making defeating Ghost an important mission directly related to protecting the people and security of Japan. The next mission was established: evacuate Japanese people from Okanashima while defeating Ghost. All strategies were detailed, each mission assigned to separate teams, with clear steps to avoid detection. The evacuation steps proceeded smoothly, with support from boats and local people, while being persuaded by members familiar with the island region. Meanwhile, the Kenbus had been fully equipped, but all their actions had fallen under Watt's gaze, who had correctly predicted Sheba's group's movements and prepared countermeasures. When night fell, each member wore diving suits and submerged into the sea, each team departing with boats and accompanying equipment, waiting for Amains to approach the island. Ghost was hiding in the ruins on the island, and the group noticed that intense fighting had once occurred here. One side was ensuring the evacuation of people from the island, while the other side, Sheba's group, advanced toward Ghost's hiding place. The Asian army on the island had only 2 Amains left, and before they could attack, Ghost had already taken the initiative to attack, destroying the entire command vehicle with a single blow. The Asian army commander thought he would be eliminated, but was saved just in time by the insurgent army's Amam. When reaching the gathering point, Gashin fired a cannon shot at Ghost, but the giant AI was unharmed, instead directly rushing into the battlefield. Shin used claws to conduct close combat, but the impact was blocked by Ghost's auxiliary arm, causing her to be pushed down to the ground. Ghost had self-improved, increasing the number of arms from 2 to 4, enhancing attack and defense capabilities, forcing Gashin and Sheba to find a way to lure Ghost into a favorable position. They led Ghost to the yard from behind, launching a surprise attack by firing fixed nets to pin it to the rock wall, intending to use electric nets to neutralize it. But Ghost fired iron hooks conducting electricity to the ground, making the situation many times more dangerous. In that moment, Sheba rushed forward to knock Ghost away, continuing to fire more electric nets pinning it to the rock wall. But Ghost's strength and reaction speed had significantly increased compared to before, forcing all 3 to move continuously to avoid being attacked. When moving through the forest, the group was suddenly pursued by Ghost, forcing them to change routes, seeking a new gathering point to more easily subdue Ghost. While Ghost relentlessly pursued, they headed to the ammunition warehouse prepared in advance. Here, not just 1 but 2 electric nets had been pre-arranged to imprison Ghost, and the warehouse door had been tightly closed. Gashin was assigned the task of detonating the ammunition warehouse holding Ghost. After luring Ghost inside the net, Gashin closed the warehouse. Then from another position, Gashin began to aim. After firing, the bullet flew into the ammunition box, exploding a large area. The three eyes were very happy, thinking this explosion was enough to turn Ghost into scrap metal. But unfortunately, despite the explosion being very large and spectacular, Ghost stood still unharmed. The explosion was intense, yet Ghost still stood towering in the flames, but its eyes had become more fierce. Having done so much without success, Sheba showed frustration. But he quickly recalled Risa to boost his mental strength. Because Ghost was dangerous, he had to be determined to defeat it. The trio charged into attack again, but were all beaten by Ghost. Gashin reminded the two to act as they did during practice. Watt was monitoring everything on the spaceship. A teammate came to remind him that they might be detected by the Asian army based on signal tracking and be implicated. Watt only cared about combat data, so he ignored it, saying that when things got tense, they just needed to retreat. He ordered Sophie to analyze the data. He seemed very excited about this case, because no matter the outcome, he would still benefit. He strongly believed in his own luck. From the boat, the organization couldn't know the situation of the children fighting out there. Although they had captured hostages, they were still looked down upon by the hostages, as they had prepared their escape route by leaking military secrets. The trio's battle was still ongoing, extremely tense. Gashin encouraged everyone, preparing to surround Ghost. Ghost quickly circled to the top as if wanting to crush Gashin. This AI learned so quickly that it could now counter coordinated attacks. The situation began to become tense. If previously they had a 50% chance of winning, now that number was gradually decreasing according to the AI's calculations. At this point, the superiors sent a signal requesting all three to retreat, as according to the original plan, they had completed half of the objectives, and this battle had little chance of winning. But Sheba immediately refused. He understood that Ghost would never spare them, and if they retreated now, future losses would be even greater. Sheba reassured his uncle that he would survive and return, asking him to be at ease. Hearing this, the superior reluctantly replied that they would send more supplies to support them. All three continued to charge into attack. This time Ghost dealt with them even more devastatingly, one being pinned to the ground, another having an arm broken off. Sheba felt something was wrong. He thought Ghost should have consumed a lot of energy, but it still seemed very vigorous. He quickly questioned where this unlimited energy source came from. According to AI analysis, it seemed to show signs of electric current flow and was absorbing batteries. Kumai sent thermal radiation images, and the eyes quickly identified the problem. The thermal camera had detected an abnormal energy source concentrated at its tail. This was the answer to how Ghost could endure against 3 MMs without depleting energy, while they were gradually depleting. Sheba realized this could be a fatal weakness, because if that component maintained too high a temperature without being able to dissipate, sooner or later Ghost would overload. They would implement Plan D. All three gathered, then decided to transfer all remaining energy from Jogan and Reiki to Kenbu for Sheba to undertake the task of finishing Ghost. This was the option calculated to have the highest chance of winning. Supplied with more energy, Kenbu charged back into battle. Sheba controlled Kenbu to lure Ghost into the Asian army's warehouse area. They would borrow weapons from here. The monster manipulated the remaining MMs to attack Sheba, but he escaped just in time and detonated the entire warehouse. Smoke and fire rose high, but when the ashes cleared, Ghost still stood proudly, not at all destroyed. The situation was becoming increasingly dire. Kenbu gradually lost ground, signaling a terrible outcome. In that moment of desperation, Guy offered the final choice, to remove all of his limits, although it was a risky action but the only chance to turn the tide. Sheba didn't hesitate, immediately agreeing. As soon as the limits were removed, Kenbu became exceptionally agile and powerful. In a flash, Kenbu had sliced off one of Ghost's arms. The battle shifted from a disadvantage to balance, with the two monster machines fighting equally. Sheba and Guy coordinated smoothly, their attacks forcing Ghost into a defensive position. They cleverly lured it into a burning area, making Ghost awkward. Once again, Kenbu cut off another of the opponent's arms, opening the opportunity for a finishing blow. At that moment, Reiki dove from above, delivering a straight slash to Ghost's head, while Jogan aimed from afar at the tail, where the energy source was stored, causing it to be completely destroyed. Ghost staggered and fell, seemingly defeated. Kenbu rushed in to deliver the final blow. But at that very moment, his sword suddenly broke in half, and the entire system in Kenbu suffered serious overload. Simultaneously, Ghost also reached its limit, its body emitting enormous heat signaling it was about to explode. To avoid exploding on the spot, Ghost tried to rush into the sea to reduce heat. However, Sheba decided to stand in its way. He wouldn't allow a scenario similar to what happened with Risa to repeat and couldn't lose more loved ones. In his heart, there was only one choice left: to sacrifice himself along with Ghost. In the final moments, Sheba and Guy had a last conversation. They mentioned that no matter what the path ahead would be, they would go together to the end of the horizon. After that promise, Guy disconnected, leaving Sheba alone. He whispered words of gratitude, because thanks to Guy, his future had been changed, and he wanted to use that future to protect others. That's what makes one human. The next moment, a blinding light engulfed everything as Kenbu and Ghost exploded together, creating a massive explosion that drowned out the screams of the two remaining friends. The organization had successfully evacuated people, but they quickly realized they couldn't contact the pilots, as both were too distraught to talk. The organization also quickly realized that one pilot had lost his signal. What remained on the battlefield was only ashes and debris. Yuyu saw that in terms of the mission, this mission had been successful, and as the organization's representative, he needed to calculate what the next steps should be. Some time later, the two friends returned to the battlefield trying to find traces of Guy and Sheba, but couldn't collect anything. The organization needed to quickly leave this place before the Asian army arrived, so they also had to leave. Gashin left, inwardly cursing Sheba as a big idiot. At the same time, Watt had collected the item he had always wanted, the remaining mechanical parts of Ghost.